The morning my son laughed for the first time, it was raining. Not thunder and drama, just that steady curtain that makes the whole world smell clean. Here's the punch in the gut. The person who made him laugh wasn't a world-class specialist or some miracle device I flew in. It was a 4-year-old girl in a yellow raincoat, 2 sizes too big, wearing one red boot and one blue. I'm Robert. My boy Ethan was born blind, and by 3 years old, the silence around him felt like a wall I couldn't buy my way through. I had the money, the access, the so-called best people, and still every meeting ended with careful words that sounded like defeat. Non-verbal limited engagement, prepare yourselves. You know what I mean. That soft tone professionals use when they're measuring out your hope with a teaspoon. I started protecting him from the world, and without meaning to, from life itself. If it rained, we stayed inside. If it was loud, we closed the door. If it was new, we avoided it. Safety felt like love, until it began to feel like a cage. On the 3rd day, this little girl visited, I almost canceled. Liability, I told myself. A child on my property in the rain with my son, who startles at new things. What if? Then the gate buzzer buzzed at exactly 9, and there she was on the screen, huddled under an umbrella that had seen better days, grinning like rain, was a secret only she knew. Her name was Penny. "It's raining," she shouted at the camera like it was a holiday. "Ethan's going to love this." Love. The rain. I had never even thought those words in the same sentence. We met them at the door, Margaret and I both clutching towels like shields. Penny didn't wait for adult ceremony. "Since he can't see," she said, marching toward the garden, "all the other stuff is extra important, right? The smells, the sounds, the cold on your skin." That single line felt like someone yanked a blindfold off my own eyes. We rolled Ethan to the pavilion. Roof overhead, open sides, the rain doing percussion on leaves and stone and wood. He sat angled toward the garden head, slightly back, listening like a kid who'd found radio for the first time. Penny ran up the steps and went straight to him. "I'm here and it's raining," she announced, like news you could touch. She took his hand. No flinch, no pity, and placed it right where the rain reached under the roof's edge. He jerked on contact, that full-body startle I'd learned to anticipate, and I moved to pull back because that's what I always did. She didn't. "It's okay," she whispered, steady as a heartbeat. "It's just water." Tap, 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 cool, not cold. Little kisses from the sky. His fingers opened, the muscles unclenched, and I heard a sound I had never heard in my home. A frayed little exhale that wasn't fear. He did it again when she hopped in a puddle and the spray tickled his cheek. He laughed. My son laughed. I swear my knees gave out. If it were you, what would you have done? Pretend to be steady or let yourself fall and finally feel everything you've been holding back. We dried off under the roof, but Penny wasn't done. She dug in her bag with the seriousness of a scientist. "I brought mud," she said, like a doctor introducing medicine. "Creek mud, not garden mud. They're different." And for 2 hours, I watched a masterclass I never paid for. Still water in a cup versus falling water from the sky. Bark dry and bark wet. A leaf that catches rain like a tiny bowl. A smooth stone that gets even smoother when you let it live in your palm. She gave him a world to feel, not a diagnosis to survive. He answered with small sounds, and the way his hands moved when something mattered. That night, I opened a journal I hadn't touched in years and wrote one sentence: he wasn't broken. He was waiting for someone who spoke his language. The next morning dawned bright, the garden scrubbed clean. Ethan woke different, curled on his side, one hand stretched toward the direction of the path, as if he could feel her coming. We set him on a blanket in the wild corner where weeds and flowers argue in the sun. The gate buzzed at 9 right on the dot. Penny came in carrying a lumpy bag like a traveling carnival. "Today is about sounds," she declared, sitting cross-legged by his knees. "Beans in a plastic tub, sharp clicks, rice in a jar, soft shush. A bell that rang true on a whistle that startled, then intrigued 2 rocks that clacked like a tap dance. Then she pulled out a harmonica, and I held my breath. "It's like blowing out candles," she said, placing it at his lips, letting him feel the breath on her hand and the vibration in her throat when she demonstrated. He blew, one long, shaky note that wasn't pretty, but was completely his. She clapped like he'd won a marathon. Call and response came next. 2 short notes, then he echoed her rhythm, not perfect, but close. And suddenly, there it was. Turn-taking. Conversation without words. Yeah, that happened in my backyard because a little girl understood timing better than anyone I'd ever hired. Then came voice. She took his hand and set it gently on her neck. "Feel this," she hummed, letting the buzz live against his palm. "Now try on you." He opened his mouth, then closed it, tried again, and gave a rough little sound that had voice inside it, tiny and brave. Margaret grabbed my arm and squeezed hard, whispering through tears. He chose to make that sound, Robert. That's volition. We built tactile cards that afternoon. Pasta glued to paper for hungry, a strip of smooth plastic for thirsty grass, and a flower petal for outside crinkly wrap for music, a square of rough yarn for Penny. At lunch, he pressed the thirsty card into Margaret's hand. "You want more juice?" she asked, voice shaking, and poured. He took a sip, then smiled, small and crooked, but real. "An ask is a bridge." He crossed it. "Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind." Penny's daycare teacher lent her a little recorder. "You don't know what you sound like," she told him, "so we'll save it and play it back." She captured his long ah, then pressed play. He went perfectly still, head tilted, listening to himself the way you listen to the ocean in a shell. She pushed farther, but gently, M and ah separately, first, then together. It was hard, he got tense, she reset the game. "Let's try high," she smiled. "It's just air and a smile." He missed it 3 times, then on the 4th, he managed a whisper of it. Did you just," she gasped, then laughed and cried at once. "Say it again." He did. "Hi. If you were me, would you have called everyone you loved, or just put your face in your hands and thank whatever mercy you believe in?" He learned her name next. Not clean at first, but you could hear it trying to be Penny. Then she taught him more because she picks words that do real work. He used it immediately. More harmonica, more recording, more of the world coming when he called for it. That night, he sat in my lap, thumb rubbing the yarn square like a talisman, and said a new word that hit me straight through the ribs. Daddy. 1 syllable, half air, half miracle. I broke open, held him close, and apologized for all the ways I had loved him wrong by keeping him safe from the very things that would wake him up. And then, twist. Not the cute kind. The kind that cornered me. My legal team called a meeting I didn't want to attend. "Robert, we need to shut this down or formalize it beyond recognition." They said faces made of policy and fear, an unrelated minor on the property, delivering what could be construed as therapy. If she slips on a stone, if he falls, if any accusation is made, you're exposed. We'll source credentialed providers to replicate the methodology. Replicate. Like you can bottle friendship and sell it in sterile packaging. They weren't villains, they were protecting me, but their fix sounded like a funeral. I rehearsed a speech, we'll pause, we'll bring in professionals, Penny can visit sometimes. Sometimes. That word tasted like betrayal. I walked out to the garden with that speech in my throat and stopped 10 feet short. Ethan heard me before I spoke. Not my footsteps, my decision. He reached for Penny with both hands and made the most complicated thing he'd ever said, stitched from new words and sounds. No. Penny. No. My son, who had lived 3 years in silence, used the voice he had just discovered to keep his friend. If it were you, what would you have done? Honor the contracts or honor the child? I fired the speech in my head and chose the mess. Not sometimes, I told Carol, turning to the woman who had arrived to clean and had ended up changing our lives every day, and not as charity. I'll hire you as Ethan's companion coordinator, pay a real salary, health insurance protections. We'll write the guardrails to keep everyone safe, but we will not sacrifice the one thing that works. The lawyers frowned, then wrote it. I called a landscaper and built a sensory garden that made sense for a kid who learns by ears and fingertips. Paths marked by wind chimes tuned to different notes, plants chosen for scent, and texture stones that hold heat water that speaks. We rebuilt a therapy room that felt like a home, instruments in reach, books in braille, and print fabrics with purpose. I stopped trying to make him typical and started making the world communicative. 2 weeks in mornings had rhythm. 9 a.m. The gate buzzes. Penny arrives with that lumpy bag and a new idea. Ethan reaches for her before she reaches him. He drinks from a cup without help. He feeds himself with a mess that looks like learning instead of failure. He walks a few steps with a cane she decorated with ribbons and a tiny bell so she can hear him coming down the path. He uses the cards like a language, outside music, Penny. And he vocalizes clearly enough that we can tell yes from please stop, I'm tired. Margaret keeps a log, not for insurance, for us to remember every time he reaches a little farther. At 6 months, the house felt different, because the house was different. Dr. Chin, a developmental pediatrician who doesn't confuse cold distance with science, started visiting to observe, not with clipboards to judge, but with questions that sounded like respect. Relationship before correction, she said. Watching them work, if I could teach this to every clinician, I would. So we tried. We built a small foundation in Penny's name to pair kids like Ethan with peer companions like Penny. Not to fake what she is, but to teach the principles she lives. Meet kids where they are. Communicate through their strongest channel. Celebrate small wins like they're the point because they are. Pay the people doing the hard work so it isn't charity. Do you think that's fair? That love gets funded only after it proves itself on a rich man's lawn. There were rough patches. Penny started full-day school, and separation is a rip no matter how gentle you make it. He regressed a little, then climbed again. He started braille slowly, carefully, fingers trembling with effort. He kept music close, piano, harmonica, anything that answered him back. One night he asked me out of nowhere, "Am I normal?" I breathed, then told him the truest thing I know. You're you. Different isn't less. Your way of being in the world is yours, and it's good. 5 years after the rain, we stood backstage at an elementary school talent show. Ethan wore a little tie because he said he wanted to look professional, dark glasses, because bright light hurts, even if you can't see it, a smooth stone in his pocket, because some treasures belong in reach. I'm nervous, he whispered, fingers resting on the keyboard like a handshake. Penny squeezed his shoulder. If you forget, I'll whisper the next part, she said, and he nodded like that was all anyone ever needed in life. Someone who will say the next note if you can't find it. They walked out, took their places, and he played a piece he wrote called Penny's Song. It started soft, like rain under a roof, then grew into something layered and honest, playful parts that bounced like her laugh, quiet parts that felt like his, listening a middle, where the melody waited for an answer and got it. Halfway through, she sang the words they wrote together, about muddy hands and being seen, and how sometimes love teaches the mouth to say what the heart already knew. The room stood at the end. I didn't care about the ovation. I cared that the path from tap, tap, tap to this stage had been built by a child who refused to treat my son like a problem to solve. Now for the ending that isn't tidy. The foundation grew. Schools called. Researchers asked for data. Insurance companies asked for codes. The same systems that once pushed us towards sterile boxes now wanted to package what we built and sell it back to places that can barely afford basic staff. Do you think that's fair? That connection gets a price tag that friendship has to dress up as protocol to be allowed in the door. I said yes to the parts that help kids faster, and I say no loudly when the forms try to squeeze the humanity out. Some days I win. Some days I sign another paper and feel the edge of what made this work getting filed away. Ethan is still blind. Some mornings the words stick like peanut butter, and we wait them out with patience and song. Some afternoons he's a poet in motion and tells me exactly what he wants and why. He is not typical, he is deeply himself. He is not fixed because he was never broken. He is connected to music, to his garden, to the girl who once said, "It's raining," and changed everything. That's enough. More than enough. So I'm asking you for something not as a billionaire or a board chair, just as a father who got taught by a kid in mismatched boots. Be somebody's penny. See the person before you recite the paper. Talk like they can talk back. Let the rain touch their hand instead of explaining the weather from a dry room. And if you sit in the kind of chair that can change policy, then change it. Pay for connection measure. The laugh you almost missed, build programs that start with relationship. Don't make families wait for a donor name before they're allowed what should be obvious. If this story made you angry at any point, good. If it made you hopeful, even better. If you disagree with me, if you think I'm romanticizing what should be clinical, or you believe credentials are the only way to guarantee safety, say so. Do you think it's fair that a little girl could do what the system could not? Or does that scare you because it means the system forgot the point? If it were you, would you have pulled the plug to protect the castle, or risked the headlines to protect the miracle happening in the mud? Tell me where you're watching from and what hit you hardest. The laugh in the rain, the first high, the twist in the garden when he said no, Penny, no, or the song on that little stage. Drop a comment, push back, share your own story of a time connection, trumped expertise or when expertise saved the day and connection followed. Share this with someone who needs a reason to try one more time. Subscribe if you want more stories that don't end in neat bows, because real life rarely does. And if you've got a penny in your life, or you were somebody's penny, write it down below because the next person who reads it might be one brave comment away from walking out into the rain and saying, "Here, hold my hand. This is the best sound. Ready to feel it together."